only grown in mainstream popularity since it first hit Western soil in the 1960s. This genre of animated media went from being a nerdy hobby that was best kept under wraps even when I was a teenager, to suddenly becoming easily available on every major streaming service in some form or another. Long gone are the days where you had to rely on other anime fans in the community uploading these crackly, low-resolution episodes of anime in 4 separate parts over onto YouTube. Nowadays, we have dedicated streaming services like Crunchyroll or HiDive which offer new releases of anime every single week. Everything from your favorite classics all the way to new and airing episodes. However, one unexpected contender in the anime streaming wars is top global streaming service, Netflix. Netflix now hosts some of the most popular and beloved anime available. And if you're like me and use a VPN, this is not sponsored by the way, you can get even more variety on the shows that Netflix has on offer. For example, on UK Netflix, we have shows like Jujutsu Kaisen, Sakamoto Days, Dandadan, Demon Slayer, and Apothecary Diaries. But over on Japanese Netflix, you've got Nana, Call of the Night, and Kabanari of the Iron Fortress. Most Western households are now rocking at least a basic plan for Netflix, which means now, more than ever, anime is easily available for the average viewer to just stumble across. And Netflix isn't stupid. It knows that owning the rights to these licenses and shows will not only bring in new customers, but will also satisfy existing ones. And with the continuing success of a lot of Netflix original movies and TV shows, it was inevitable that they would turn their attention to this new strengthening market within animation. To executives and pencil pushers, the idea of making Japanese media more marketable to wider audiences through the use of Netflix originals was kind of a no-brainer. And thus the legacy of Netflix anime adaptations was born. However, if you're anything like me and you spend way too much time watching TV shows rather than touching grass, you likely already know that this ploy has historically not worked out very well. You see, storylines that grip fans' attention in animated form don't necessarily translate well to a limited live-action remake. There are things that animation can do that live-action simply just struggles to even attempt to replicate. We can suspend our disbelief at Vegeta or Goku's hairstyle within animation because the artwork is so stylized that we simply just accept the designs for what they are. However, in live action, where the actors will need to use makeup, heavy prosthetics, and even wigs, these previously accepted designs within the animation now just look painfully awkward. Goku isn't giving Dragon Ball, he's giving Drag Race. So why is it that in 2025, instead of receiving a 3rd season for the original animated show, we're instead getting a live-action remake of Kakegurui? This news might have actually been what took out Pope Francis, I'm not gonna lie. That man was low-key an otaku. He definitely played that copy of Undertale MatPat gave him. And if you haven't seen some of the online uproar already, I can confirm that this series is far more of a distant cousin than a twin to the original anime. Yeah, that's right. Today we're going to be having a look at Netflix's bet, as well as Netflix's mixed bag of live-action anime adaptations. Because if you weren't already familiar, they've tried this a good few times. Now, although the title of most infamously bad anime remake would likely go to 2009's Dragon Ball Evolution, a close second in many anime fans' opinion would likely be Netflix's 2017 adaptation of the beloved Death Note series. So this was Netflix's first attempt at adapting an anime into a live action for a wider Western audience. And the choice of Death Note was definitely a risky one. On one hand, this landmark series had a huge dormant fan base to capitalize on, people who had been starved for any new content and would likely be amenable to a more accessible live-action adaptation. Because yes, there was actually a Japanese live-action movie of Death Note that was released in 2006. But this movie isn't exactly easy to stream for the average anime fan or easy to purchase at your local HMV. Meaning that on a technicality, there was a gap in the market for a certain community of fans to have accessibility to what could be a fun live-action remake. But on the other hand, with Death Note being such a household name within anime as a whole, there was a lot of pressure and expectation to try and live up to. Not to mention that the original anime series ran for over 35 episodes and the original manga had 12 volumes. So trying to fit in all of the intricate details and key characters would definitely be a squeeze without some major rewriting. Something which, even when done in a minor way, often stirs controversy among anime fans, with the manga readers and anime fans debate being one as old as time. So how did Netflix do? Well, immediately starting off on the wrong foot. The decision was made that the original Japanese names were now not very relatable to a wider Western audience. Not to mention that their decision to cast non-Japanese actors for all of the major roles would make the original Japanese names of the core characters somewhat hard to swallow for a lot of fans. So for Light Yagami, his name was transformed into Light Turner. Yikes. And as for the iconic Misa Amane, the main love interest and femme fatale of the series, she was turned into Mia Sutton? Mia Sutton? Really, yeah. Yeah, Mia Sutton. Okay. Cool. That's really cool. Honestly, I'm genuinely surprised that Ryuk got to keep his original character name instead of having it changed to something like Roy. Like, I don't know how Ryuk is any harder to say than Misa. Look, I get that Barry from the beer garden might scoff at a young teenage boy being called Light, but are we seriously suggesting that the original Japanese character names were so hard to pronounce or digest that they needed to be dumbed down this much? Like, Misa literally just dropped one letter, and this relatively small change on paper was definitely a symptom of a wider issue with the movie. Being panned by both critics and average watchers alike, this movie was a train wreck from start to finish. The changes made to suit a Western audience only served to dumb down what was otherwise an originally suspenseful story, turning it into something that better resembled a Disney after-school special. Light was no longer a charismatic loner by choice, but instead this edgy TM high school boy who resented his classmates and what he saw as injustice. Taking Light away from what many fans saw as a Patrick Bateman-style narcissist to something more akin to a Reddit incel. Sure, there are definitely still key character beats being met, but the weight of Light's actions don't really have any real impact. Whether we'd like to admit it or not, a lot of us can understand the reasoning of Light's actions within the anime. At the start, he was simply just enacting justice against some of society's worst criminals. Predators who were targeting children, men who were forcing themselves upon women, and of course those who were seeking to take somebody else's life for their own selfish gain. Sure, what anime Light is doing is morally grey at best, but many of us in the real world do understand how it feels to have something bad happen to you and watch as no real justice is served for the injustice that you suffered. It is exactly what makes Light such a compelling protagonist and antagonist. We understand and empathize with his point of view, only to then watch as this power to play God consumes and destroys him. Going from a promising teen who was just walking in the shadows of his superintendent father, to then writing down the names of decent cops and petty thieves in order to save his own skin. Anime and manga Light isn't a good character because he's a good person. He's a good character because he does things that the average person would consider doing in his position. I'd love to pretend and morally grandstand that in 2025 I wouldn't have a single name to put in the death note, but that would be a massive lie because there are people in power who I vehemently don't agree with, and if I had the power of the death note, would I potentially use it? I can't say that I wouldn't. I don't think the average person could sit there and pretend that they wouldn't use it to benefit what they think is right and wrong. Again, that is what makes Light such a good character. He is, unfortunately, annoyingly relatable, at least at the start of what he does. But Light in the Netflix movie has none of this character growth or development whatsoever. His backstory is all exposition, and his motives feel far more soaked in resentment for his classmates and the pursuit of getting a girlfriend than they do in the pursuit of justice. Sure, he does still target criminals, but his reason for doing this feels so forced and inorganic compared to how his character is presented. Now, I do understand the limitations when it comes to a live-action movie's runtime when compared to a show's more expansive timeline, but Light's character just felt so rushed that it was hard to feel anything about what he was doing. To be blunt, I just didn't care what happened to Light. I didn't like him, I didn't dislike him, I thought he was a boring loser. And if you want to argue that that's good writing, sure, it could be good writing that he is a boring washout loser, but that doesn't mean that the movie is good or entertaining, and I do feel like even if your character is meant to be a washout boring loser, your movie still has to be entertaining. And as for Misa, Mia, she was no longer this immaculately dressed tragic character that felt indebted to Light, but instead this equally one-dimensional and unlikable outcast who only hungered for power. I understand that they wanted to make her character more of a secondary antagonist in order to better humanize Light later in the story, but all this achieved was making Misa, Mia, a significantly less interesting and empathetic character. Although, you know what, props to Netflix for casting Margaret Qualley, as regardless of how poorly written Mia was within the film, Margaret did a respectable job of working with the material she was provided. Although the only thing that I do think works really well within this movie, as to not be entirely negative, is how Ryuk was both voiced and animated. Hiring Willem Dafoe as the voice of Ryuk was such a good decision, and honestly, the voice acting is great.
Good. Now, as long as we're playing, let's do it right. There's no need to stop it. Who?
Sorry, what else is there?
How? For a beginner, not bad at all. Now, watch.
Willem's malice and menace seeps through every single voice line and honestly massively outshines Light's performance. Within the world that this movie takes place in, Ryuk feels like a tangible threat. Now honestly, there is a whole deep dive and conversation to be had when comparing the Netflix movie to the original Japanese movie, to the original animated series, then to the original manga. In fact, many people are still revisiting this movie through online video essays and memes. It is commonly considered a major fumble when it comes to anime remakes, as well as being a common argument against Western outlets getting access to Asian media for adaptation. However, despite this widely panned flop, Netflix didn't give up.
It's ready!
What is it?
Or Jolly Roger. We are.
The Straw Hat Crew.
So after the release and subsequent backlash of Death Note, Netflix persevered. They knew that the anime and Japanese media market was not only strong, but still expanding, especially post-2020, where many people first discovered or reconnected with this type of animated media. Choosing to tackle another beloved and previously successful license, Netflix went ahead on their next major endeavor, 2021's Cowboy Bebop. Based off the legendary and beloved work of director Shinichiro Watanabe, the hope from Netflix was to recapture the moody and grand space setting and also bring to life the lovable cast of bounty hunters. And again, much like 2017's Death Note, the reception was lukewarm at best. The score on Rotten Tomatoes sits at 45%, with reviews varying between, if something was cool in the original, you could expect the adaptation to make it feel lamer. If something's complex or understated, you can expect the adaptation to flatten its meaning. And also, while it isn't nearly as bad as Netflix's Death Note adaptation, Cowboy Bebop just doesn't swing. And although there is some more favourable feedback, as a whole, the consensus is that this attempt at recapturing the Cowboy Bebop magic simply fell too flat. So how is it that in 2023, Netflix not only succeeded at an anime adaptation of one of the big three anime, but also got the seal of approval and applause from both audiences and the original mangaka, sitting at over 12 million views. The original Netflix One Piece teaser trailer gained an overwhelmingly positive reception, with fans from all walks of life actually allowing themselves to get excited over the prospect of a successful adaptation. The trailers were looking promising, gaining millions of views and hundreds and thousands of likes. And so when the series eventually launched on Netflix's platform on August 31st, 2023, people were eagerly tuning in. And judging by the 86 tomato meter score on Rotten Tomatoes, and of course the 8.3 rating on IMDb, it was clear that Netflix had struck gold. In the initial 8 episodes of season 1, we're introduced to the early core cast of the Straw Hat Pirates. Well, with the exception of Chopper, who was planned to be introduced in season 2. Each episode covers a storyline which allows each individual character to not only shine, but also have their own background and growth. And although that very much sounds like it could be a rush, especially with how many core characters they do introduce in just season 1, it actually does a really good job of making the episodic flow feel organic and making the world of Luffy and his friends feel lived in. With the approximate 8-hour runtime of season 1, adapting 95 chapters out of 1091. Now, as somebody who has tried and failed to get both into the original One Piece manga and anime series, I was a bit hesitant about even watching Netflix's offering when it came to this particular franchise. However, learning how well it summarized some of the early manga chapters, I decided to give it a go, if only to know whether it was a better adaptation than Netflix's Death Note movie. And honestly, as a non-believer, I was pleasantly surprised. The amount of love and budget that was poured into this project by both cast and crew is really evident. The universe that Netflix has built feels lived in, vibrant, and just as outrageously quirky as the original manga imagery elicits. With one of the standouts to me being the recreation internally and externally of the Merian Barty, as well as those uncanny valley snail phones. I can only imagine the excitement that One Piece fans must have felt when they saw how well Netflix did with bringing a series that they love into the real world. Watching some of the most well-known faces within anime being brought to life and embodied by actors who not only did a fantastic job of representing the character, but also equally admired the source material. Because a lot of the actors on set were already fans and really enthusiastic about One Piece. This win for Netflix and anime adaptations as a whole meant that within a month of season 1's release, Oda, the original creator of One Piece, shared a video online confirming that season 2 would be coming to Netflix. But of course, this brings us on to the next project that Netflix has in store for anime fans. Something which at the time of this video's release will be coming out in a matter of days. And no, it is not season 2 of One Piece or an adaptation of Demon Slayer. It is far more disappointing. Now, although this anime released originally back in 2017, it really hit its peak with the wider Western anime community around the back end of 2020. This anime and its subsequent trends were going massively viral, all due to a newer audience of cosplayers and anime fans discovering it during lockdown. If you were a cosplayer, anime fan, or even just a general user of TikTok, you absolutely had Kakegurui content flooding your feed every couple of scrolls. With some of these videos gaining hundreds of millions of views, it was catapulting small cosplay creators into online infamy. It was up there amongst some of the biggest anime micro trends such as 02 and 02 collectibles, Danganronpa split screen videos, and who could forget the My Hero Academia fan shipping. And no, we're not going to talk about the Bakugo poster incident. Not here, not now. People were enamored with the eccentric and over-the-top vibes of this show, the absolute insanity that was the plot of Kakegurui, and also some of the intricate and unique designs of many of the antagonists. Hell, even I did my own slightly scuffed closet cosplay of Yumeko way back when. Although I do need to say that my cosplaying has greatly improved since this time. Back in the day, I didn't know anything about wig styling, and so I just raw dogged a blunt bang and would put the wig on my head. So, you know, like, give me some more props. This is not the peak of my work. And with Netflix having the streaming license for Kakegurui during this time period, they were arguably the streaming platform that best catapulted Kakegurui's relevance within the wider Western market, allowing new and existing anime fans to discover the series without somebody having to be signed up to an already exclusive anime streaming service. So instead of a season 3 of the animated Kakegurui series, or even a season 3 of the Japanese live-action TV show, Netflix, in all of its great wisdom, decided that its widened fan base needed something more fresh and more westernized to sink their teeth into. Something that takes the overall idea of Kakegurui, but makes it more palatable for people who would otherwise maybe turn their nose up at such an over-the-top and eccentric anime.
My name is Yumiko, and I've been bad. But sometimes you have to do a bad thing to make the world better.
Yeah, it's not looking good. It's not looking good, guys. This is Netflix's Bet, a live-action adaptation of Kakegurui. The first trailer for this series was launched onto YouTube on April 21st, 2025, so just last month. And only sitting at 300,000 views, the like ratio is even more embarrassing, because it only has, at the time of recording, 4.3k likes. And as you can guess from just those metrics alone, the YouTube comments were even more brutal. People are already predicting how bad this series is gonna be, as well as criticizing every single thing that's currently been shown of the series. The setting for Bet is St. Dominic's Prep, and in this adaptation, Yumiko is out to avenge the death of her parents by gambling against the school's elite student council, her aim being to eliminate the opposition with the help of some of the other less popular students. Now, the first big change that is pretty obvious is the redesign of these students and the overall setting. The casting and character design for the series has been widely slammed by both anime and manga fans, with many people wondering why so many of the key core characters were not only non-Japanese, but also looked completely different to their source material. For example, one of the popular speculations is that the character of Runa, a small and childlike looking member of the student council, who is always wearing this iconic orange buddy hoodie, has seemingly been changed into just some guy wearing a furry trapper hat. From what I can find with the limited information available on the IMDb page for Bet, the actor playing this substitute Runa is Rami Khan, an actor who is objectively a pretty far departure from every other iteration of this character. The same can be said for the character of Itsuki, who is now speculated to be this revised version played by actor Ryan Sutherland, once again being a drastic departure from every other depiction of this character. And that's not even mentioning Ririka, I'm sorry if my pronunciation is absolutely whack, please forgive me, who originally wore this fun mask in order to cover up her identity as the identical twin of the student council president, has now had this iconic necessary mask removed and instead is rocking the 2020 special, all of which removes a lot of the mystery of her character and also makes it painfully clear that they are a different actor compared to the student council president. From what's been previewed of this adaptation so far, there's so many unnecessary costume and makeup decisions, choices that simply don't work. The coral blue number 2 lipstick that the student council president wears works well with her contrasting blue eyes and white hair within the anime, but in Bet, this makeup choice just just looks so out of place against the black hair, but also the really understated eye makeup and lack of any kind of eye brightening or contact lenses. The same can be said about one of the craziest characters within the series, Midori, whose hair and makeup is giving more Mel from My Parents Are Aliens than it is giving Punk. Like, I swear, this kind of hairstyle and these kind of accessories are still available at Claire's. Now, I want to clarify that I actually have no issues with adaptations wanting to widen their cast and make the casting more inclusive. Part of adapting something which already exists is finding ways to make it new and exciting for existing and new audiences. I generally don't see the harm when it comes to diversifying characters and also offering out roles to less recognized actors. However, I do take issue with just dumbing down the content for no discernible reason. I kind of feel there's always this negative assumption that Western audiences won't interact or gel positively with content that strays away from the familiar. Not just in the setting, but also narratively too. But as we've seen with success stories like Squid Games, Parasite, Studio Ghibli, and to be honest, just anime as a general, the type of audience that Bet would appeal to aren't going to be your beer garden boys or typical footy fans. More likely, it's going to be teens that are into anime and cosplay, adult pop culture fans, or just people who are open to more fantasistical stories. They don't need to neuter the more interesting and outlandish aspects of the source material in order to appeal to fans and bring in new audiences. And yet, for some reason, the choice was made that an English-speaking audience simply won't engage with something that doesn't come from within our culture. Something which maybe doesn't make sense to us, but maybe makes more sense in the original source material. For example, you don't need to turn pachinko into a fruity in order to make British audiences understand that it's gambling. Just like with Death Note, the watering down of something that people already enjoy actively harms adaptations. Whether it be changing the original names because they're too hard to pronounce for English speakers, removing key character traits or designs because they seem too outlandish for a Western audience, or even just making the general plot 10 times simpler. The assumption that if something is taking place in a high school, you need to have jocks, you need to have nerds, you need to have popular girls. Like, yeah, sure, these are common narrative tropes everywhere, but the need to westernize things in order to process them is just so unnecessary. With the series set to release on the 31st of May, aka in a couple of days, only time will tell how good or bad this adaptation will truly be. And although I'm not really a fan of the anime series and I've never read the original manga, I won't lie, I am definitely very skeptical as to how good this is gonna be. I have a feeling it's gonna go down in infamy along the same lines as Death Note, but let me know down below, are you guys going to be watching Bet, aka Western Kakegurui? Are you going to be tuning in when it releases? Are you going to give Netflix your views? Let me know what you think of the trailer and watching this series down below. Also, tell me down below, have you watched any really good anime adaptations or any other really bad anime adaptations that I haven't mentioned? Because admittedly, I've never really watched the Japanese live action adaptations of many popular properties. I've never watched the Attack on Titan one. I've never watched the Japanese Death Note, so I would be curious to give them a go, but I have to admit I'm still skeptical a little bit about adapting just animated media into live action, so let me know if those are any good too. I unfortunately had to push this video back by about a week because I ended up having medical issues and I needed to give myself a little bit of healing time before I got in front of a camera and bright lights again, so apologies for the slight delay, but hopefully the video was fun and was worth it. And don't worry, because I already have my next video in the works and I've got loads of cool, exciting video ideas and plans up and coming. So again, I have loads of stuff coming, so if you enjoy what I do, definitely hit the subscribe button and the bell icon beside it to never miss an upload and support what I do. And of course, if you do want to see more content from me in between videos, whether that be outfit photos or whether that be short form videos, then make sure to check out my Instagram and my TikTok for daily uploads. And now, as always, it is time for the end of the video outfit check and some of your fan art. Bye! Hello, it is the end of the video outfit check as always. So starting off at the top of my head, we have my AliExpress goggles. I wear them quite often, I've had them for years, and honestly they're kind of a staple in a lot of my outfits. Coming down to necklaces, we have my Named Collective choker, my Marc Jacobs razor blade, and one of my Vivienne Westwood orb necklaces. Now the tops I'm wearing are both from 6 Dimension Shop and they were very kindly gifted to me. They weren't gifted to me in order to promote them, but I wear a lot of their clothes and I often tag them in what I'm wearing, so they ended up sending me some of their new collection and I think it looks really cute. I really like this corset top and I really like this little mesh top as well. And then as expected, we're going comfy on the bottom, and today we're wearing my black cargos by Named Collective.